Hello everyone, this is a walk slash talk through of Beasts of Northrend, heroic mode for the new TOGC. Not really new, but new. So this fight has three phases. Phase 1 is Gormok, Phase 2 is the Worms, and then Phase 3 is Ice Howl. Um, Phase 2 is kind of the more scary one, but each of these phases, if you don't respect them, can cause issues. Um, the first mechanic for phase one, there's a tank mechanic that that has to be respected, and that's really the most dangerous one. So every 11 seconds, I mean he says 10 seconds, but really every 10 to 11 on the 11th second, he does this weapon damage plus a bleed that stacks. So here Gormok starts live. The tank starts on it, and he eventually will get impale stacks. So these stacks, 1 and 2 is very easily healable. So here's our first stack, 11 seconds in. After the first stack, or after, second stack is healable. Third stack you might need to use some cooldowns, and the fourth stack ends up being extremely uncomfortable. And usually that's when people decide to bubble it off. Here we decide to do something weird where we go 4, and then we have an off-tank taunt, and the Pally just gets healed through his stacks until they fall off. Most people will bubble after 4 stacks around 45 seconds, and then that way Forbearance is back up for phase 2, which you'll need. So you can see here this tank is taking massive amounts of damage. He's not even tanking with 4 stacks. It's kind of unnecessary. So that's the main thing. You can either do 2-2 or 3-3 swaps, or you can do 4-2, or you can 4 bubble, grab another 2, then have an off tank pull if you still need to take stacks. Other things you want to do is you want to avoid this fire. This fire is cast on ranged. The longer you sit in it, the more it puts a dot on you, and if you sit in it longer, you get a bigger and bigger dot. So you really want to make sure you get out of there early. Aside from that, it's pretty straightforward. And then these snowballs. So basically, these snowballs, he targets somebody, puts a snowball on their back. They do 2 things. They do a bunch of AoE damage, and then they silence. So you definitely want to get it out of ranged into melee. Even though the melee take AoE damage, 1 snowball, maybe even 2 is healable when they do their AoE, but you definitely don't want to be overwhelmed. So you want to make sure you run them into melee. They have a kind of a weird hitbox, so make sure you get them really inside his legs so the melee can actually cleave it. And you can't cleave off of Gormok onto the snowball. What you can do is target the snowball and cleave off of them into Gormok. So it's kind of weird that way. So you definitely don't want to be overrun, so you want to make sure you get those down. And that's really pretty much it for phase 1. You do want to make sure you're range 10, not for this fight, but the next fight, and it's much easier to just before you even start this entire encounter, already be in appropriate positions. It just makes it so much easier. Now, when phase 2 hits, you get 2 worms. So here's a little schematic. This is Acid Maw right here. He starts stationary, and this is Dreadscale. He starts mobile. This guy is mobile, so you have to do Grob-like poison, so you do have to kite him. It doesn't do it very often, but you do have to pay attention to that. And they have really 2 major mechanics. This guy will do something called Paralytic Toxin. It puts a dot on you that increases in damage, and a movement slow that increases as time goes on until you become paralyzed. This guy does a burn debuff on you. It causes some AoE damage around you. It's in a dot. And the only way to get rid of the paralytic poison is to run on top of somebody who has the burn debuff. So for example, the fight starts, the paralytic poison from Acid Maw will go onto the raid. So for example, this is a raid member, paralytic poison goes on here. What this guy needs to do is needs to run to the tank, because the only person who gets the burn debuff at the start is the burn tank. So he needs to either run like this, or the tank needs to get it to him. Or may they meet halfway is also an option. So that's kind of how it goes. And the reason why you do range 10 is actually pretty self-explanatory, because it chains. So for example here, we're starting Acid Maw. This person right here got selected with the Paralytic Toxin, but a whole bunch of people were right up there, right close. So you don't want to do that. You want to make sure you're spread out so you don't have a whole bunch of people get Paralytic Toxin. And then what you see is a bunch of people with Paralytic Toxin who have kind of no idea what to do. They're trying to run to the melee. They're trying to figure out how to get rid of this thing. What they really need to do is find the Dreadscale tank, which is the diamond over there, or the Dreadscale tank needs to bring it to them. The other thing you need to watch out for is that the Dreadscale mob has an AoE, so if you are going to go to the tank, make sure that he's not actively doing his frontal. So that's kind of an important note. Now this is an acid mob burn strategy first. This is not what we're going to be doing. This is kind of a proof of concept for us, but killing acid mob causes a bunch of issues, mainly because he will punt people. So for example, here the entire melee got selected, which is great, but look how far we are from the paladin. It makes it kind of annoying to deal with. So here is another pug that we did where we do Dreadscale first. So the nice thing about this is if the melee get paralytic toxin, the tank is right there. So here, for example, boom, they just run to the tank, easy peasy. You just have to make sure you don't get in front of the frontal, so just make sure to time it correctly. Aside from that, again, people here are probably poorly stacked. An acid maw is not even tanked. You don't need a tank for him. His damage does like nothing. It's like it's very easy to heal. Here's a paralytic toxin on all the ranged, which is unfortunate because they're not stacked well. But all they need to do is get to the tank, and you see how you get slower and slower and slower. So the tank will eventually have to bail you out a little bit. So here he comes, and then now we're dispelled. If you respect those two mechanics, everything will go well. Now the thing about these fights is when they burrow, they come back, they switch which one is stationary and which one is kiteable. But they also switch how they do their debuffs. So at the beginning, the paralytic goes on the raid, and the burn on the tank. So the tank has to kind of dispel, or you have to run to the tank. When they come back up from their first burrow, the paralytic poison is always going to be on the tank, and the burn debuff is going to be on the raid. So it's up to whoever gets burned has to come and dispel the tank. Now, most people with a few Lust Phase 2, you won't get too many of these paralytics on tanks, probably just the one, and if you have a prop pal, you could probably just bubble it. Again, if you use your bubble or bop on 4 stacks of Impale, you'll get it back in time. But what you can also do is wait till you get a new debuff after a burrow and then kill Dreadscale, and then that way it's safer because that tank will already have the burn debuff, so he won't get paralytic toxined. And you have a minute. Now when you kill one worm, the other one enrages. It turns red, it turns angry. So here one of the worms is going to die, Dreadscale is going to die, and this one's angry. It hits like a truck, so you do want to make sure you want to roll some cooldowns. There is a bug on PTR where if you let Dreadscale burrow with 5%, and when he comes back up, kill him, Acid Maw doesn't seem to be enraging. So that's something, I don't know if it will make it to live, but that is something that is currently happening. And then lastly is Ice Howl. Ice Howl basically has a bunch of abilities. It has an AoE frontal, a wide frontal frost damage that freezes you. Ideally, you want to raid sack or frost aura mastery it. So you want to make sure that your ret, your prot, and your two holies are all kind of in opposite sides of Ice Howl. You don't want to be all together. And you just want to make sure the raids generally spread out. You also want to make sure you're kind of tanked towards against a wall, because he does this whirl ability right here, and if the melee are against a wall, they can not get knockbacked. You can also range it. It has a range. I think he might be able to melee hit it without being punted. So here's that little frost thing. Ideally, if one of the pallies that's over here can raid sack or aura mastery and save everybody. Lastly, he does this like massive crush where he kind of jumps in the middle, punts everyone out, backtracks, and then charges somebody. When you get charged, you want to make sure you don't need a movement speed to avoid it, but you do need to run in one direction straight on. Don't get stuck on a pillar. If he does hit you, it's almost a wipe because he doesn't get stunned and he's enraged. So here he just does this crash. He's going to punt everybody to the wall. Everybody gets stuck, and he's going to pick somebody, and that person needs to run out of the way. If he gets hit, Ice Howl doesn't get stunned, and he gets enraged and kills everyone. So you don't want to mess this up. It's very easy to not mess. It's very easy to do, so don't mess it up. And it's otherwise a wipe. The other thing is when he's tossing everyone up, if you bop someone at this stage, or let me show you. If you want to, come on, do the thing here, right here. So if you bop people right here at this point, then what happens is you don't get stunned. So here you will not be stunned. You can actually be going around and DPSing the target, which is obviously super nice, especially if you're a warlock. You can keep your corruption up and etc., etc. And if you didn't want to lust phase 2, this would be a great time to lust because you do double damage. You want to make sure you save your cooldowns for this. Even if you don't lust, you want to save your gloves and stuff so that you can have it for this. That's pretty much it for phase 3. If you have enough people alive, you'll be able to get through the DPS. You won't have any issues. And that's the Beast of the Northrend.